Welcome back to the Pillar Boys Podcast. I'm Brian G. This is the Famous Pen Network. It is 7:25 p.m. on Friday the 13th. One of them days. Over 100 trillion in wealth is about to be inherited. Here are the biggest winners. While the largest handovers are still a decade or two away, an estimated 2.5 trillion a year is currently being passed down to the next generation and spouses. More than $100 trillion in household wealth is expected to be passed down as part of the Great Wealth Transfer, the largest in U.S. history, according to a new report. Well, personal wealth doubling over the past 12 years and more wealth concentrated at the top, especially among older baby boomers. The financial cascade in the coming years is expected to accelerate. An estimated 124 trillion is projected to be passed to family members and charity by 2043, according to a report from Cerulli Association. Of the total, $18 trillion will go to charity and $106 trillion to family inheritance. Much of that will come from the wealthy. About $62 trillion will be passed on from the wealthiest 2% of Americans, or those with a net worth of over $5 trillion. While the largest handles are still decades or two away, and an estimated 2.5 trillion a year is currently being passed down to the next generation and spouses, according to the report. The annual windfalls will rise to $3 trillion a year by 2030 and to $4 trillion a year in 2036, eventually growing to over $5 trillion a year. It's already happening, said Chase Horton, senior analyst for wealth management at Cerulli, with more women, millennials, and Gen Zers set to join the ranks of the newly rich. The face of American wealth is set for its most radical makeover in decades, with huge implications for wealth management, luxuries, collecting, and philanthropy. Women will gain an increasingly share of wealth in the coming years, according to Cerulli. $54 trillion will pass to spouses, most of them women. These horizontal transfer where a spouse inherits wealth before getting passed down to younger generations will be especially permitted in the next decade. Generation X stands to be the biggest beneficiary in the next decade, given demographic. Gen X is expected to inherit $14 trillion by 2034 and $39 trillion by 2048. Put another way, of the $2.5 trillion being passed down every year, about $1 trillion is going to the Gen Xers. Millennials will pass up the inheritance baton sometime around 2038. Expected to inherit $40 trillion over the next 25 years. Gen Z is next in line, with an expected $15 trillion due to be handed down over the same transfer. Estimating inherited wealth, especially over decades, is as much art as science. Current trends on assets, values, bequests, charitable giving, and the lifespans and spending rates of the wealthy all may vary. Whether the great wealth transfer will prove to be lucrative for heirs and for the wealth planning industry as advertised remains to be seen. So far, the estimate and forecasts are only growing. Cerulli's previous estimate for the Great Wealth Transfer in 2021 forecasts a total $84 trillion being passed down over 25 years. The nearly 50% increase in the estimate was driven by three powerful economic forces: inflation, soaring assets values, and increased wealth concentration. For its estimates, Rules used the Federal Reserve surveys for consumer finance, the most comprehensive federal data on the financial well-being and wealth of American households. It then takes typical saving rates, retirement expenses, equity, bond, and real estate projections, and applies expectations on life expectancy, taxes, and parent patterns, and giving them wealth transfer to generate a forecast. Horton said the $84 trillion adjusted for inflation will be $100 trillion today. Asset prices have also soared in value since Cerulli's last valuation, with equities up 27% and real estate values up 39%. Since assets in the U.S. are heavily concentrated at the top, most of the gains since the pandemic have gone to the wealthy. According to the report, the share of the wealth held by those worth $10 trillion or more jumped from 40% in 2020 to 44% in 2023. At the same time, the amount of wealth held by those aged 60 or older increased from 54% in 2020 to 61% in 2023. High net worth households are more likely to be succeeded by the assets at the end of their life, for instance. While it spread out over 25 years, the great wealth transfer will create tectonic shifts in the wealth economic. In the short term, wealth management firms, families, offices, trusts, and estate attorneys and other advisors to the wealthy will be hyper-focused on planning and structuring the most efficiencies and effective ways of passing down wealth. Educating the next generation will also be crucial. Step one is preparing current clients, Horton said. Larger term, the wealth management industry, luxury brands, and nonprofits will need to adapt to an entirely different client base, shifting from older male wealth creators to more women and next generation clients. The second step is reaching beyond the core clients to spouses, significant others, children, and business partners, and building an adversary practice that can substantially engage with these stakeholders, Horton said, and eventually bring them on as active clients. To adapt to the new client base, firms serving wealthy clients need to recruit more women and younger advisors to better reflect and relate to new clients, Horton said. It's mirroring the advisory practice with the clients, Horton said.